My son arrived with 30 relatives without warning. She earned her seaside peace after a lifetime of silent sacrifices. But when the door opened, old patterns knocked louder than ever. This time she greeted them with contracts, fees, and a new sense of self. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise that this will be the best story you will hear in your life. Eleanor Mason stood on the weathered deck of her new beach house, watching the waves crash against the shoreline. At 67, with silver hair that caught the golden light of the setting sun, she finally had what she'd worked her entire life for. This modest two-bedroom cottage overlooking the Gulf Coast wasn't extravagant by any standard, but to her it represented 4 decades of sacrifice, dedication, and meticulous saving. The salty breeze caressed her face as she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. This moment had been 40 years in the making, 40 years of teaching 8th grade English at Palmetto Middle School, grading papers late into the night, tutoring students on weekends for extra income, and putting every spare dollar into her retirement fund. She had raised 2 children largely on her own after Robert, her husband, left when the kids were still in elementary school, claiming he needed space to find himself. That space apparently extended to another state with his 25-year-old secretary. Eleanor had never complained. She'd simply doubled her workload, taken on summer school teaching positions, and somehow managed to put both Michael and Sarah through college. There had been no luxuries, no extravagant vacations, no designer clothes, just hard work, dedication, and the promise she made to herself that someday, she would have her own place by the sea. And now here she was. The cottage wasn't perfect. The kitchen cabinets needed updating, the bathroom tile was chipped in places, and the floorboards creaked with every step. But to Eleanor, it was paradise. She had spent the past 3 weeks arranging her carefully selected furniture, hanging curtains that danced in the sea breeze, and placing potted plants on every available surface. Her books, her most treasured possessions, lined the built-in shelves in the living room, organized by genre and then alphabetically by author, just as she had taught her students. She turned from the railing and walked back inside, her bare feet cool against the wooden planks. A pot of herbal tea waited for her on the small dining table, alongside the novel she had been meaning to read for years, but never found the time for. This was what retirement looked like for Eleanor Mason: quiet mornings with tea and books, afternoons spent walking along the beach collecting shells, and evenings watching the sunset from her deck. No bells ringing to signal the end of periods, no stacks of essays to grade, no parent-teacher conferences to prepare for. Just peace, just time for herself, finally. The sharp ring of her phone disrupted the tranquility of the moment. Eleanor glanced at the screen and smiled when she saw her son's name. "Michael," she answered warmly. "How are you, sweetheart?" "Mom, great timing. I was worried you might be out exploring your new neighborhood." Michael's voice came through, energetic as always. At 39, he was a successful marketing executive with his father's charm, but thankfully a more reliable character. "Just watching the sunset," Eleanor said, settling into her favorite armchair. "It's beautiful here, Michael. You and Lisa really need to come visit soon. Bring the kids, they would love the beach." "Actually, that's exactly why I'm calling," Michael said, and something in his tone made Eleanor sit up straighter. "We're all coming to see you." "Oh?" Eleanor's heart lifted. "That's wonderful. When were you thinking?" "Well, that's the thing, Mom. It's actually going to be a big family reunion. Everyone wants to see your new place, and since it's right on the beach, we thought it would be perfect for the annual Mason family gathering." Eleanor frowned slightly. "The annual gathering, but we usually do that at Thanksgiving at your Aunt Patricia's house in Nashville." "Yeah, but Patricia's house is being renovated, and when I mentioned your new place, everyone got excited. It's perfect timing since the kids are out of school for summer break. We can make it a real vacation." A small knot began to form in Eleanor's stomach. "How many people are we talking about, Michael?" "Well, let's see." There was a pause as Michael seemed to be counting. "There's me, Lisa, and our 3 kids, then Sarah and Dave with their 2. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Jim, their 3 kids and their families, that's another 9 people. Uncle George and Aunt Meredith, their daughter Jessica and her husband, and twins, my cousins Mark and Stephen with their wives. Oh, and Grandma Josephine, of course, she wouldn't miss it. Eleanor's mind raced as she calculated. Michael, that's nearly 30 people. 32, actually, Michael said cheerfully. But don't worry, Mum. We don't expect everyone to fit in your house. Some of us can stay at nearby hotels. And when exactly is this happening? Eleanor asked, trying to keep her voice steady. We'll start arriving next Monday and stay for about a month. Most people will come and go throughout that time, but there will probably be at least 20 of us there at any given time. Next Monday, 5 days from now. A month of family members coming and going through her sanctuary, her hard-earned haven. Michael, this is all very sudden. I don't think I can— Oh, Mom, it'll be fun, Michael interrupted. Lisa's already planning all the meals, though we'll need to use your kitchen, of course. The kids are so excited to spend time with their cousins at the beach. And everyone's pitching in for groceries, so you won't have to worry about that. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed without sound. The weight of what was being proposed— no, not proposed, decided— settled on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Her peaceful retirement, her quiet mornings, her solitary beach walks, all gone in an instant. I'll need to think about this, Michael, she finally managed to say. Think about what, Mom? It's all arranged. Flights are booked. People have taken time off work. Without asking me first? The words came out sharper than she intended. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mom, it's family, Michael said, his tone suggesting she was being unreasonable. We don't need formal invitations. Besides, you've always been the one who brings everyone together. Remember all those years you hosted Christmas at our old house? You love having family around. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling a complicated mix of emotions wash over her. Yes, she had hosted Christmas for years, cramming everyone into their small suburban home, cooking for days in advance, sleeping on the couch so relatives could use her bedroom. She had done it because that's what was expected of her. Because she was the nurturer, the caretaker, the one who made sacrifices. But that was before. Before she had worked and saved and sacrificed for 4 decades to create this space for herself. Before she had finally, at 67 years old, decided that it was time to put herself first. I need to go, Michael, she said quietly. I'll call you back tomorrow. She ended the call before he could respond and sat in silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. The peaceful evening she had been enjoying just minutes before now felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Eleanor walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine, something she rarely did, but tonight seemed to call for it. She took her glass out to the deck and leaned against the railing, looking out at the darkening ocean. 32 people, for a month, in her sanctuary. She took a sip of wine and felt a strange calm settle over her. She had spent her entire life accommodating others, putting their needs before her own. Her ex-husband's career had always taken precedence over her own ambitions. Her children's activities had filled her evenings and weekends. Her students had consumed her days and many of her nights. Even in retirement, it seemed she was expected to continue in the role of the ever-accommodating matriarch. But something had shifted inside Eleanor Mason. Perhaps it was the realization that at 67 she had more years behind her than ahead. Perhaps it was the culmination of decades of giving without receiving. Or perhaps it was simply the recognition that this house, this small, imperfect, beautiful house by the sea, was the physical manifestation of her right to claim space in the world. As she finished her wine and the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, Eleanor made a decision. She would not allow her sanctuary to be invaded without her consent. She would not sacrifice her peace, not again, not anymore. 1. Newfound determination. She went inside and opened her laptop. She had 5 days to prepare, and she knew exactly what she needed to do. The next morning, Eleanor was up before the sun. Sleep had eluded her most of the night as her mind raced with calculations and plans. She sat at her small kitchen table, with a notepad, a calculator, and a determination that surprised even herself. First, she researched local beach rental properties similar to her own. The going rate for vacation homes in her area during peak summer season was staggering, between $350 to $500 per night for homes that accommodated large groups. Hotels charged around $200 per night for standard rooms. She then calculated food. Costs for 32 people, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, drinks, the laundry expenses for towels and bedding, utilities that would skyrocket with constant air conditioning, showers and cooking, cleaning supplies, wear and tear on her furniture and appliances. By mid-morning, Eleanor had filled several pages with figures. The total was astronomical, enough to consume nearly her entire year's pension. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about respect, about boundaries, about finally standing up for herself after decades of acquiescence. With a deep breath, Eleanor picked up her phone and called her cousin Vivian, who ran a successful bed and breakfast in Vermont. "Vivian, it's Eleanor. I need your advice, and possibly some materials." 3 days later, Eleanor's cottage had undergone a remarkable transformation. Professional-looking signs hung throughout the house. Seaside Haven Guesthouse Eston 2025 on the front door, a framed price list in the entryway, house rules posted in every room, a laminated menu on the refrigerator, registration forms on a small desk in the corner of the living room. She had ordered navy polo shirts embroidered with Seaside Haven staff and had them express shipped to arrive before the weekend. She'd set up a payment system on her tablet. She'd even printed out business cards. The guest rooms were reorganized to maximize capacity, with air mattresses stored in the closet for overflow. The kitchen pantry was stocked, but with each item carefully labeled with price tags. Beach towels and chairs were arranged in the garage, with rental rates clearly displayed. The final touch was the contract she had drafted with Vivian's help, which outlined accommodations, meal plans, amenities, and payment terms. Each guest would be required to pay a 50% deposit upon arrival, with the balance due before departure. On Sunday evening, Eleanor stood in her transformed living room and surveyed her work with a mixture of anxiety and pride. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Michael, her daughter Sarah, her sister-in-law Patricia, all wanting to touch base about the family gathering. She had responded to each call with brief, non-committal answers, revealing nothing of her plans. Now, as the sun set on her last evening of solitude, Eleanor changed into her newly arrived navy polo shirt, poured herself a cup of tea, and stepped out onto the deck to watch the waves. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew one thing for certain: she would never again be taken for granted. Monday dawned bright and clear, with a gentle breeze coming off the ocean. Eleanor was up at 5, preparing for the day ahead. She made her pot of coffee, arranged fresh flowers on the registration desk, and positioned herself in the entryway, clipboard in hand. Michael's SUV was the first to arrive, pulling into the driveway just after 10 o'clock. Eleanor watched through the window as her son, daughter-in-law Lisa and their 3 children, Emma, Jake and little Olivia, piled out of the vehicle, followed by her daughter Sarah and her husband Dave with their 2 teenagers. Eleanor took a deep breath, straightened her polo shirt and opened the front door. "Welcome to Seaside Haven," she said with a professional smile. Michael's expression shifted from excitement to confusion as he took in his mother's attire and the sign above the door. "Mum, what's going on?" he asked, laughing uncertainly as he approached with suitcases in hand. "Are you playing some kind of game?" "Not at all," Eleanor replied calmly. "Please come in and register at the desk. I'll need a credit card for the deposit." The family stood frozen on the front path, exchanging bewildered glances. "Mum, you can't be serious," Sarah said, stepping forward. "This is a joke, right?" Eleanor maintained her composure. "I've never been more serious. If you'd like to stay at Seaside Haven Guesthouse, I'd be happy to accommodate you. Our rates are competitive with local properties, and I've prepared several meal plan options for your convenience." Michael set down the suitcases and crossed his arms. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're family, not customers." "Yes, you are family," Eleanor agreed. "Family who planned a month-long stay in my home without asking me first. Family who assumed I would cook, clean, and cater to 32 people without compensation. Family who didn't consider that this might not be what I want. Tense silence fell over the group. The children shifted uncomfortably, sensing the adult tension but not understanding its source. Perhaps we should discuss this inside, Lisa suggested, always the peacemaker. The kids have been in the car for hours. Eleanor nodded and held the door open wider. Of course, please come in. Once inside, the children's eyes widened at the transformation of Grandma Eleanor's cottage. Emma, at 14, immediately spotted the price list and gasped. $300 a night? For one room? She exclaimed. That's the family rate, Eleanor explained. It's 20% below market value for comparable properties. I've done extensive research. Michael rubbed his forehead, a gesture reminiscent of his father that made Eleanor's resolve momentarily waver. Mum, we can't afford these prices. We budgeted for helping with groceries, not hotel rates. I understand, Eleanor said, softening slightly. But I can't afford to host everyone for free either. This house represents my entire life savings, and the expenses of hosting 32 people for a month would deplete my retirement fund. Dave, Sarah's husband, had been quietly examining the price list and meal plans. Actually, he said slowly, when you break it down, it's not unreasonable. A hotel would cost us more, and we'd still have to pay for all our meals out. Sarah shot her husband a betrayed look, but he shrugged. I'm just saying, if we were staying anywhere else, we'd expect to pay. Why should it be different because it's family? Because that's what family does, Sarah argued. Mom has always hosted us before. Yes, I have, Eleanor agreed, when you were children living under my roof or when you visited for holidays. But this is different. This is 32 people for an entire month in a house I've owned for less than a month myself, a house I've worked my entire life to afford. The front door opened again, and Eleanor's sister-in-law, Patricia, entered with her husband, Jim, and their teenage son. They stopped short at the scene before them. What's happening? Patricia asked, looking around at the signs and the tense faces. Apparently, we're checking into a hotel, Michael said sarcastically. Patricia's eyes darted between Michael and Eleanor, then landed on the price list. To everyone's surprise, she burst out laughing. Oh, Eleanor, you brilliant woman, she exclaimed. I told them they should have asked you properly, but no one listened. Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude toward Patricia, who had always been more of a sister than an in-law. Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me, Patricia said, still chuckling. I think it's high time someone in this family stood up for themselves. Jim, get your wallet out, we're checking in. Jim, a quiet accountant who rarely got involved in family drama, nodded and approached the registration desk. 2 adults, 1 teenager. How much is the deposit? Eleanor fought back tears as she processed their payment. One by one, the other family members reluctantly followed suit. Michael was the last to approach the desk, his expression a mixture of hurt and confusion. I don't understand why you're doing this, he said quietly. I thought you'd be happy to have everyone here. Eleanor looked at her son, her firstborn, the boy she had sacrificed so much for, and wished she could make him understand. I would have been happy if I'd been asked, not told. I would have been happy to work together to plan something that worked for everyone, including me. Michael was silent for a moment, then handed over his credit card. Fine. 2 adults, 3 children for 2 weeks. By evening, 26 family members had arrived and checked in, filling every corner of Eleanor's cottage. The atmosphere was strained, with whispered conversations stopping abruptly when Eleanor entered rooms. The children, however, seemed oblivious to the tension, delighted by the proximity to the beach and the company of their cousins. Eleanor served dinner buffet style on the deck, a simple but hearty lasagna with salad and garlic bread, and itemized each meal on the individual invoices. As she moved among her family members, refilling water glasses and collecting empty plates, she caught fragments of conversations. Can't believe she's charging her own grandchildren. Always been generous before. Must have lost her mind. But there were other comments too. Worked her whole life for this place. Gas never asks for anything for herself. Might be right, you know. As the sun set over the ocean, casting long shadows across the deck, Eleanor retreated to her small office, formerly the laundry room, and closed the door. For the first time since her family's arrival, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day's emotions. Her hands trembled slightly as she recorded the day's transactions in her ledger. Had she gone too far? Was she destroying her relationship? With her family over a principle? The doubt crept in, threatening the confidence she had felt that morning. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly composed herself. "Come in." The door opened to reveal her 85-year-old mother-in-law, Josephine Mason. Despite the divorce, Josephine had remained close to Eleanor, often commenting that her son had been a fool to let you. "Go? May I sit?" Josephine asked, gesturing to the chair, opposite Eleanor's small desk. "Of course," Eleanor replied, closing her ledger. Josephine settled into the chair with a sigh. "Quite the stir you've caused today." Eleanor nodded, unsure whether she was about to receive a scolding or support from the family matriarch. "I was married for 52 years, Josephine said, her eyes distant with memory. "I raised 4 children. I cooked approximately 21,000 meals. I never had a career outside the home, never earned my own money." She focused her gaze on Eleanor. "And I never once stood up for myself the way you did today." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm proud of you," Josephine continued. "It takes courage to say enough, to decide that your life, your time, your space has value." She reached across the desk and patted Eleanor's hand. "Don't you dare back down now." By the end of the first week, Seaside Haven had settled into an uneasy routine. Eleanor rose early each morning to prepare breakfast, a simple but satisfying spread of fresh fruit, yogurt, homemade granola, and pastries from a local bakery. Family members drifted in and out, some grudgingly signing the meal sheet, others with growing acceptance of the new arrangement. The children, predictably, had adapted the quickest. Eleanor's grandchildren had turned the daily routine into a game, solemnly presenting their meal tickets, which Eleanor had created after 10-year-old Jake asked if he could pay for his own pancakes, and thanking her with exaggerated formality. That made her struggle to maintain her professional demeanor. But beneath the surface calm, tensions simmered. Eleanor could feel it in the strained silences that fell when she entered rooms, in the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached, in the forced smiles and overly polite interactions. On Friday evening, as Eleanor was updating her accounts at the small desk in her office, she overheard voices from the deck just outside her window. "This isn't right," Michael was saying, his voice low but intense. "She's turned what should have been a family reunion into some kind of business transaction." "I don't know," Dave replied. Eleanor recognized her son-in-law's measured tone. "I think there's more to it than that. Your mom has always been the one who takes care of everyone else. Maybe this is her way of saying she needs something different now, by charging her own family," Michael scoffed. "Come on. You know as well as I do that Mum has always been the most generous person. Something's changed her." "Yes," Dave agreed. 40 years of putting everyone else first. That would change. Anyone." There was a pause and Eleanor held her breath, her pen poised above her ledger. "Look," Michael said finally, "all I'm saying is that this isn't the Mum I know. The Mum I know would never put a price tag on family time." "Maybe the Mum you know deserves more credit than you're giving her," Dave countered. "Have you ever actually asked her what she wants? Or have you just assumed she's happy to always be the one giving?" Eleanor didn't hear Michael's response. As the men moved away from the window, their voices fading into the evening air. She sat motionless, Dave's words echoing in her mind. Have you ever actually asked her what she wants? In 40 years, had anyone ever asked? The next morning, Eleanor noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Several family members were huddled in, conversation over coffee, falling silent when she approached with fresh muffins. Michael was conspicuously absent, as were his wife and children. By mid-morning, Eleanor discovered why. Lisa approached her in the kitchen, her expression uncomfortable. "Eleanor," she began, fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit. Eleanor had noticed years ago. I wanted to let you know that Michael has taken the kids to stay with his college friend Jeff in Tampa for a few days. Eleanor carefully set down the bowl she was mixing pancake batter in. I see. He's pretty upset about all this, Lisa continued, gesturing vaguely around the kitchen. He feels like you've rejected the family by turning your home into a business. I haven't rejected anyone, Eleanor said quietly. I've simply asked to be treated with respect. Lisa sighed. I know. And for what it's worth, I understand what you're doing. But Michael, he remembers growing up with a mom who never said no, who always put everyone else first. This new boundary is confusing for him. Eleanor felt a complicated mix of emotions, sadness that her son couldn't understand her position, frustration at being cast as the villain, and a small persistent spark of anger that her decades of selflessness were now being used against her. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. Will you be joining Michael in Tampa? Lisa shook her head. No, I think he needs some time to process this on his own. And honestly, I disagree with him on this one. My mother always let everyone walk all over her, and it made her miserable. I don't want to see that happen to you. After Lisa left, Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, her pancake batter forgotten. The house felt suddenly too full and too empty at the same time, crowded with people but missing the understanding she craved. That afternoon, while most of the family was at the beach, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Michael. Mom, he said without preamble, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Have I? Eleanor asked, sitting down on the edge of her bed. What point do you think I'm making, Michael? That you're upset we didn't ask before planning the reunion at your house, he said. And I get it. We should have asked. But turning your home into a hotel, charging your own grandchildren for meals, that's taking it too far. Eleanor took a deep breath. It's not just about asking, Michael. It's about assuming that my time, my space, and my labor have no value. It's about expecting me to serve everyone without complaint, because that's what I've always done. That's not fair, Michael protested. No one thinks of you that way, don't they? Eleanor's voice was steady despite the emotion building in her chest. When was the last time someone in this family asked what I wanted? When was the last time someone offered to cook for me, to clean up after me, to take care of my needs? The silence on the other end of the line was telling. I've spent my entire adult life taking care of other people, Eleanor continued. I raised you and Sarah alone after your father left. I worked full-time while managing a household. I put both of you through college. I hosted every holiday, attended every school event, was there for every crisis, and I did it all gladly because I love you. Then why are you doing this? Michael asked, his voice smaller now. Because I'm 67 years old, Michael. I've worked hard for 4 decades to earn this retirement, this little piece of paradise. And the first thing that happens when I finally have something that's just for me is that it's taken away without my consent. No one's taking anything away from you, Mom. Aren't you? Eleanor felt tears threatening, but held them back. You decided that my home would host 32 people for a month. You decided that I would cook and clean and serve. You decided all of this without once asking if it was what I wanted. How is that not taking something from me? There was a long pause. I never thought of it that way, Michael finally admitted. I guess I always assumed you'd want us all together. I do want us all together, Eleanor said gently, but on terms that respect my boundaries too, that acknowledge that my time and space have value. So this whole hotel thing, it's not about the money. Eleanor laughed softly. Of course it's partly about the money. Do you have any idea how much it costs to host 32 people for a month? My pension wouldn't cover it, but it's about more than that. It's about recognizing that my contribution has worth. Michael was quiet for so long that Eleanor wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I never meant to make you feel undervalued. The simple apology, unexpected and sincere, brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Thank you for saying that, Michael. But I still think this whole hotel setup is extreme, he added. Couldn't we have just had a conversation about it? We're having that conversation now, Eleanor pointed out. Would we be if I hadn't done something dramatic enough to make you stop and think? Another silence, then a reluctant chuckle. You always were good at teaching us lessons, Mom. Remember when Sarah and I kept leaving our bikes in the driveway and you donated them to the neighbor kids for a week? Eleanor smiled at the memory. You never left them in the driveway again. No, we didn't. Michael's voice had softened. Look, I still don't fully get it, but I'm coming back tomorrow with the kids. They miss their grandma, hotel manager or not. After the call ended, Eleanor sat for a long time processing the conversation. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a start, an acknowledgement at least that her feelings mattered. The next few days brought subtle shifts in the family dynamic. Michael returned with his children, checking back in with less resentment and more thoughtfulness. Sarah started helping with breakfast preparation without being asked. Patricia organized a night off for Eleanor, arranging for everyone to eat at a local restaurant. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected quarter. Eleanor's nephew Mark, Patricia's middle son, approached her one morning as she was setting up the breakfast buffet. Aunt Eleanor, he began, uncharacteristically serious for the usually jovial 40-year-old. I'm an accountant, as you know. Eleanor nodded, waiting to see where this was going. I've been watching how you've set up this operation, he continued, gesturing around the kitchen. It's impressive, but I think you could optimize it better. Your pricing structure needs work and your inventory management is, well, let's just say there's room for improvement. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Don't get me wrong, for someone with no business background, you've done an amazing job, Mark hurried to add. But if you're serious about making this work, I could help you set up a proper system, streamline things. Making what work exactly? Mark looked confused. The guest house? Isn't that what you're doing, setting up a business? Eleanor hadn't thought of it that way. The Seaside Haven guest house had been a means to an end, a way to make a point about boundaries and respect. She hadn't considered it might be something more. I'm not sure, she admitted. This was originally just a way to handle the family reunion situation. Mark's eyes lit up with understanding. But it could be more. You've got prime real estate here, Aunt Eleanor. The vacation rental market in this area is booming. With some proper systems in place, you could turn this into a real income stream. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Eleanor had never thought of herself as a business owner. Her entire career had been in public service, in nurturing and educating. But wasn't that, in its way, a kind of service too? Creating a space where people could relax, feel welcomed, make memories? I wouldn't know where to begin, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she realized they weren't entirely true. She had already begun, hadn't she? With her pricing research and her registration system and her meal plans. That's where. I come in, Mark said, grinning. Look, I've been thinking about consulting on the side for ages, but I've never had the time to set it up. This could be a win-win. You let me use this as a case study, and I'll help you establish a proper business plan. What do you say? Eleanor looked around her kitchen, at the neat row of labeled containers, the meal sign-up sheet, the stack of receipts waiting to be processed. She thought about the satisfaction she'd felt creating systems, solving problems, providing a service. That was valued, not just expected. I say, she replied slowly, that I might need a better accounting system. Mark's grin widened. That's just the beginning, Aunt Eleanor, just the beginning. That evening, as the extended family gathered on the deck for dinner, Eleanor noticed a different quality to the conversations. There was less tension, more genuine interaction. Even Michael seemed more relaxed, helping to serve drinks and joking with his cousins. Eleanor was about to join them when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. Hello? She answered, stepping back into the kitchen for quiet. Is this Eleanor Mason, of Seaside Haven Guest House? A woman's voice asked. Eleanor frowned in confusion. Yes, this is Eleanor. Wonderful. My name is Diane Roberts from Coastal Living magazine. I'm calling because we've heard about your fascinating story. The retired teacher who turned her retirement home into a thriving guest house when her family descended unannounced. One of your neighbors is our photography editor's cousin, and she mentioned your situation. We'd love to feature you in our second act series. Eleanor felt as if the floor had suddenly tilted beneath her feet. I'm sorry, what? How did you hear about this? Oh, word travels fast in small beach communities, Diane said cheerfully, especially when it's such a compelling story. A woman, in her 60s, standing up for herself, turning a potential family conflict into a business opportunity. It's exactly the kind of inspiring narrative our readers love. Through the kitchen window, Eleanor could see her family on the deck, laughing, talking, sharing the meal she had prepared. The family that had, just days ago, been offended by her insistence on boundaries, on recognition of her worth. Ms. Roberts, Eleanor said slowly, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This isn't a business exactly. It was more of a statement. Even better, Diane exclaimed, a statement that turned into an opportunity. That's the angle we'd love to explore. Would you be open to an interview and perhaps a small photo shoot at your property? Eleanor was about to refuse when she caught sight of Mark through the window, animatedly explaining something to Patricia and Jim, gesturing toward the house with enthusiasm. Her nephew, who saw potential where she had only seen a problem to solve. Could I think about it and call you back? Eleanor asked. Of course, Diane replied. Take your time, but not too much time. We're finalizing our fall issue soon. After hanging up, Eleanor stood motionless in the kitchen, the magazine editor's words echoing in her mind. A statement that turned into an opportunity. Was that what was happening here? Had her act of self-assertion somehow opened a door she hadn't even known existed? Eleanor stepped out onto the deck, into the warm evening air, filled with the voices of her family. As she took her seat at the table, she looked around at the faces of the people she loved, complicated, frustrating, beloved, and realized that something fundamental had shifted, not just in how they saw her, but in how she saw herself. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Eleanor Mason felt not just needed but valued, not just loved but respected. And the possibility that stretched before her of building something that was truly her own, of defining the third act of her life on her own terms, filled her with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in decades. 3. Weeks after the Mason family reunion began, Eleanor stood on her deck in the early morning light, coffee cup in hand, watching the sun rise over the ocean. The house behind her was quiet, most of her family members still asleep. In the past week, several had departed, Aunt Patricia and Uncle Jim, 3 of the cousins and their families, while others had extended their stays, finding unexpected pleasure in the structured arrangement that had evolved at Seaside Haven. Eleanor's partnership with Mark had transformed her impromptu business into something more legitimate. They had spent hours at her small desk, developing spreadsheets, creating a proper booking system, calculating optimal pricing structures, and planning for future investments. Mark had even set up a simple website featuring photographs of the house and beach taken by his wife, a hobbyist photographer. You're a natural at this, Aunt Eleanor, Mark had told her the previous evening as they reviewed the month's financial projections. You've got the perfect combination of organization and hospitality. It's like you were meant to run a guest house. The comment had stayed with her through the night. Was this what she was meant to do? After 40 years in education, could her retirement take such an unexpected turn? She sipped her coffee, remembering a conversation from decades ago. She'd been 25, engaged to Robert, full of dreams and ambitions. I'd love to run a small inn someday, she'd told him. Something cozy by the water where people could come and feel at home. Robert had laughed, not unkindly, but with the casual dismissiveness that she would later recognize as his hallmark. That's a nice fantasy, Ellie, but let's be practical. Teaching is a more sensible career for a woman who's going to raise a family. And she had agreed, setting aside her dream as impractical, unrealistic. She had embraced teaching, had loved it even, and had never revisited that early ambition. Until now, when circumstances had conspired to place it directly in her path. The sliding door opened behind her, and Eleanor turned to see Michael stepping onto the deck, his own coffee in hand. "Morning, Mom," he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "You're up early?" "I always loved dawn," Eleanor replied. "There's something about the beginning of a day, full of possibilities." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sky change colors as the sun continued its ascent. "I've been thinking," Michael said finally, "about all of this." He gestured toward the house behind them. "About what you said. About no one asking what you wanted." Eleanor turned to look at her son, surprised by the thoughtfulness in his tone. "You were right," he continued. I took you for granted, assumed you'd always be the one giving, never the one receiving." He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It made me realize I don't actually know what you want, Mom. Not really. And that's on me." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you for saying that, Michael." "So, I'm asking." "Now," he said, turning to face her fully, "what do you want, Mum? What would make you happy?" The question, so simple yet so profound, caught Eleanor off guard. What did she want? For so long her wants had been secondary, subsumed by the needs of her children, her students, her responsibilities. She had almost forgotten how to prioritize her own desires. "I want," she began, then paused, organizing her thoughts. "I want to be seen as more than just a mother or grandmother or ex-wife. I want to be valued for my skills, my intelligence, my capabilities. I want to build something that's truly mine." She gestured toward the house. "This whole guest house situation started as a statement about boundaries, but it's become something more. I'm good at it, Michael, and I enjoy it. The planning, the organizing, the creating of a space where people feel welcome, but also respectful." Michael nodded slowly. "You know, that makes sense. You were always the most organized teacher at school. All the other parents talked about it. And you made our house feel special, even when we barely had enough money for groceries." "I had a dream once," Eleanor admitted, the words feeling strange in her mouth after being buried for so long. "Before you were born, I wanted to run a small inn by the water." Michael's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You never told me that." "Never told anyone, not after your father dismissed it. It seemed impractical. And then life happened. Marriage, children, divorce, work. There was never time or money or space to revisit old dreams." "And now?" Michael asked. Eleanor smiled, feeling a weight lifting as she spoke her truth aloud. "Now I have all three: time, money, modest though it may be, and space, my own space, earned through 4 decades of hard work." "So Seaside Haven isn't just a lesson for the family? It's actually something you want to pursue?" Eleanor nodded. "I think it might be. Mark's been helping me work out the business side, and it's viable. I could convert the house to a proper guest house, not full-time, but perhaps on weekends or for special events. It would supplement my pension and give me a purpose, a challenge." She looked at her son, searching his face for understanding. "I need that, Michael. A purpose that's mine, not defined by what I can do for others." Michael was quiet for a moment, and Eleanor prepared herself for objections, for the hurt feelings she had glimpsed when this all began. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "You know, Lisa's been saying for years that we rely on you too much, that we need to let you have your own life." He gave a rueful smile. "I guess I needed a pretty dramatic wake-up call to see it." Eleanor reached out and squeezed his hand. "We all get stuck in patterns. It's hard to change them without something shaking us up." "Well, you certainly shook things up," Michael said with a short laugh. "The family will be talking about this for years. Remember when Grandma Eleanor turned her house into a hotel and made us all pay?" They both laughed, and Eleanor felt the last of the tension between them dissolve. "I've been meaning to ask," Michael said, his tone lighter now. "What are you planning to do with all the money you've collected from us? Take a luxury cruise? Buy a sports car?" Eleanor smiled. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. I'm going to use it to renovate the kitchen and add a proper ensuite bathroom to the guest room. Business investments, you might say." Michael shook his head in wonder. "My mother, the entrepreneur, who would have thought?" The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Several more family members departed, with checkout procedures that now felt normal rather than awkward. Eleanor presented each group with a carefully itemized bill, which they paid without complaint, many adding generous tips that she tried to refuse but eventually accepted with grace. In the afternoon, Eleanor had her interview with Diane from Coastal Living magazine. Sitting in the living room, with the ocean visible through the windows behind her, Eleanor shared her story, how a family imposition had led to an unexpected new chapter in her life. "It wasn't just about the money," she explained to Diane. "It was about recognizing my own worth, about establishing that my time and space deserve respect." "And the family?" Diane asked, glancing toward the deck where several of Eleanor's relatives were visible, enjoying the late afternoon sun. "How did they react to your stand?" Eleanor smiled. "It was rocky at first. Change always is, especially when it challenges long-established dynamics. But ultimately, I think it's been healthy for all of us. My children and their cousins are learning that I'm more than just Mom or Aunt Eleanor. I'm a person with my own needs and ambitions, and I'm learning that it's never too late to advocate for yourself, to create boundaries, to pursue dreams you thought were long buried." After the interview, Diane's photographer took pictures of Eleanor on the deck, in the kitchen, and walking along the shoreline. "You're a natural," the young woman told her. "The camera loves you." By evening, only a core group remained at Seaside Haven: Michael and his family, Sarah and hers, and Grandma Josephine, who had declared that she was perfectly comfortable and planned to stay the full month. They gathered on the deck for a seafood dinner prepared by a local catering company, Eleanor's treat, a small splurge from the unexpected profits of her impromptu business venture. As they ate, watched the sunset, and shared stories from the past 3 weeks, Eleanor felt a sense of contentment wash over her. This wasn't the retirement she had envisioned. It was somehow both more complicated and more fulfilling. "I've been thinking," Josephine said during a lull in the conversation. At 85, she had earned the right to command attention when she spoke. "This guest house idea of Eleanor's, it's got potential." Everyone turned to look at the family matriarch, who continued, "I've got that old family property in the mountains. Been sitting empty since your grandfather passed, just costing me property taxes. What if we turned it into a second location? Seaside Haven and Mountain Haven, a little family business empire." Eleanor stared at her mother-in-law in astonishment. "Josephine, are you serious?" "Dead serious," the older woman replied. "I'm too old to run it myself, but I could be a silent partner. You've got the know-how now, and that nephew of yours, Mark, has the business sense. Between the three of us, we could make something of it." The table erupted in excited conversation, with everyone offering opinions and suggestions. Eleanor sat back, watching her family transform her small act of self-assertion into a vision larger than she had imagined. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and strangely wonderful. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Eleanor returned to the deck alone. The moon cast a silver path across the dark water, and the sound of waves provided a gentle soundtrack to her thoughts. 6 weeks. Ago she had stood in this same spot, believing that retirement meant a quiet life of books and beach walks. Now she was contemplating a business partnership, a second property, a feature in a national magazine, all because she had finally said enough to a lifetime of giving without boundaries. The sliding door opened behind her, and Sarah stepped out onto the deck. "Can't sleep?" her daughter asked, coming to stand beside her. Eleanor shook her head. "Too much to think about." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, when I was little, I used to think you could do anything. You worked full-time, kept our house running, helped with homework, volunteered at school. You seemed superhuman." "Far from it," Eleanor said with a small laugh. "I know that now," Sarah agreed. "But what amazes me is that even at 67, you're still showing me what's possible, still teaching me." Eleanor turned to look at her daughter, seeing not the child she had raised, but the woman she had become. Strong, thoughtful, capable. "What am I teaching you now?" she asked softly. Sarah smiled. that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, that your worth isn't determined by what you give to others, that dreams don't expire. She reached out and took her mother's hand. That the most powerful word in the English language might be no. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier. I wish I'd taught it to you earlier. You're teaching it now, Sarah said simply, and I'm listening. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight on the water. Two generations of women at different stages of the same journey towards self-determination. In the morning, Eleanor would begin the process of transforming her impromptu statement into a legitimate business. There would be permits to obtain, regulations to navigate, renovations to plan. Mark had already drafted a business plan, and Michael had offered to help with the website. Sarah, with her background in education administration, had suggestions for managing bookings and seasonal scheduling. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. There would be family members who wouldn't understand, who would still expect the old Eleanor, endlessly accommodating, perpetually available. There would be difficult boundaries to maintain, uncomfortable conversations to have. But for the first time in decades, Eleanor Mason was building something for herself. Not just a business, but an identity separate from her roles as mother, teacher, caretaker. An identity built on the radical notion that her time, her space, and her labor had value, not just to others, but to herself. As the moon continued its arc across the sky, Eleanor made a silent promise. From this point forward, she would approach life not as an endless series of obligations, but as a landscape of choices. She would give generously, love abundantly, and serve willingly, but never at the expense of her own worth. The sliding door opened once more, and Michael appeared with 3 glasses of wine. "Thought you might want to join our little conspiracy," he said, handing glasses to Eleanor and Sarah. "We're plotting the marketing strategy for Mountain Haven in the kitchen." Eleanor laughed. "At midnight? Entrepreneurship knows no clock." "Mom," Michael said with a grin that reminded her of his childhood enthusiasm for new projects. "Coming?" Eleanor looked at her son, then her daughter, then out at the ocean that had drawn her to this place that had become not just a home, but a launching pad for an unexpected journey. "Yes," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "I'm coming." 3 months later, Eleanor stood in the newly renovated kitchen of Seaside Haven Guesthouse, arranging fresh flowers in a vase on the breakfast table. The October issue of Coastal Living magazine lay open on the counter, featuring a 4-page spread titled, "Never Too Late: How Eleanor Mason Turned Family Imposition into Business Inspiration." The article had generated more interest than she could have imagined. Bookings for Seaside Haven were solid through the holiday season and picking up for spring. The renovation of Mountain Haven, Josephine's property in the Blue Ridge Mountains, was underway with a projected opening in summer. Mark had quit his corporate accounting job to manage the financial side of the business full-time, and Eleanor had hired a local college student as a part-time assistant. But more meaningful than the business success was the wave of messages Eleanor had received from women her age and older, inspired by her story. Women who had spent decades putting everyone else first. Women who were finding the courage to establish boundaries, to claim space, to value their own time and energy. "Your story gave me permission to say no to hosting Christmas for 20 people this year," one woman had written. "At 72, I'm finally learning that loving my family doesn't mean sacrificing myself." Eleanor's phone chimed with a message.